What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. We are finally done with the intercooler install on the turbo element build, and we can finally move forward into the fuel system. This box here has all the fittings and lines we're gonna need to run a fuel pressure regulator, run a feed line, and install a return line. Shout out to B&R Fittings for delivering all of this the other day. Right here, I know his website hasn't been working because it is currently down right now, because he needs to find a different provider. But if you guys are interested in any fuel fittings, you guys can hit up his Instagram, link in the description below, which will lead you to his number. And the best way to contact B&R Fitting is just to text or call him. All the fittings we need are in here. We have PTFE line, which is rated for ethanol, race gas, whatever, without sticking. And then we have the fuel pressure regulator itself. Right here we have the B&R Fittings Fuel-It fuel filter. We also got a turbo blanket from Pulsar Turbo itself. This is for the V-band housing, so we're gonna install this as well too today. We have an X-Series AM wideband, which we're gonna install with the injectors in a later video, but this was also brought to me so we can have it ready to rock and roll. Now, before we get into the fuel stuff, if you guys have seen the last video, we did the intercooler install, but we didn't install the front bumper. So what I want to do right now is trim the bumper up, get the bumper fitted permanently, then we can move on to the fuel system. You can see the bumper is kind of just laying on the front end right now, but it is still gapped up. And you can see right here, we have maybe about an inch to go back on all around. And that is because the intercooler is hitting the grill right here. So we're gonna modify this front grill. My goal is to try to keep at least the front half of the grill to kind of hide the intercooler a little bit, but I'm sure he doesn't mind if the whole grill was cut out, because that's what most element guys do. And we're gonna figure something out with the top section here so we can get air flowing into the core, which is all the way up there. And let's go ahead and take some measurements and whip out the grinder or razor blade, however dangerous you want to be. These are the marks that I made, and I'm not going to fully entirely cut this lower section or the mid completely off. So I'm going to trim away, and you know, you really take your time if you want to fit it up nicely. So I got these marks up here as well too, and I'm going to whip out the grinder and go hammy in Miami. I mean, not in Miami, but you get it. Front bumper cover is almost all the way on, and it looks like we have just a little gap. The bumper needs to come down a little bit, and by the looks of it, the intercooler piping is in the way. But everything that we cut is cleared, and this side is actually pretty closed up. It's just the intercooler piping side, and it looks like a quick little trim, possibly on the top as well too, and this should fit up really nicely. Something like that. All right, let's trim this one more time. Hole saw for the win. Let's go. Bumper cover is not secured, but if I put my knee on it, you can see closed gaps. The top all aligned with the holes, and guys, the freaking bumper cover is looking freaking awesome with the intercooler. Sheesh. that hole cut, top and bottom. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut holes right here on the front, not holes like speed holes, but I'm gonna make some oval grill looking shape holes, and I'm probably gonna do 2 of it. The intercooler does go all the way up to about right here, so I'm gonna make 1 on the bottom and then 1 more on the top. It's gonna take a little precision cutting, so I'm just gonna do one of those transitions. Dang, that looks freaking awesome. So now the air coming from the turbo is going to get cooled down, dual pass, gets cooled off again before it enters the intake manifold. That is sick. So the next thing here is the turbo blanket. This again is from PSR themselves, and it actually shipped pretty fast. It showed up today and tracking hasn't even been updated yet, but we have this from PSR. This is specific to the GT35 and a V-band housing. It's a little more slimmer, and where's the hardware? Okay, here's the springs, and this is pretty straightforward. It's a blanket. You cover the turbo exhaust housing like you would cover yourself with a blanket in bed, right? So let's go ahead and get this installed. We have the turbo blanket installed. We got the spring on there, left and right side right there. So the turbo blanket is not going to move. It's just going to sit there, and hopefully I have enough space to put the water line. Once we get it for the turbo, we're going to put water lines on here because this is going to be a daily commuter, and we want to ensure the turbo is going to last. Now that we have the turbo blanket out of the way, let's get into the fuel system. Let's go through all the parts that we're going to use for the fuel system and the new return line. This right here is 8 feet of PTFE-6 hose, and this is black nylon braided because we want to keep it kind of stealth mode. We're going to use this from the fuel filter to the rail to the regulator, regular return back to the fuel basket. This right here is a fuel filter. I want to say this is a 10 micron, and we have the fittings to step it down to a -6. This right here is an Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator we're going to be adding into the fuel system. All the fittings we're going to need to build our lines to go from filter to rail, regulator, and regulator back to the fuel basket. And the basket is going to be using a bulkhead style because the basket only has 1 line coming out for the feed, which is also technically the return system. But we're adding the return line just so we can add in the regulator, just so we can have pressure held up top when we're boosted. I'm going to start with the fuel pump basket and run the lines all the way to the front to ensure we have enough line to at least go from the rear of the car to the front, and then we'll build the lines to the fuel rail. So I got to take this back out. So before I took the basket out of the tank, I took note that this right here is facing the front. So that means I'm going to face this AN line, this bulkhead, in parallel to this line here, and facing the AN forward, obviously, right? So it looks like I'm going to use this section right here because underneath, that is the only part of the basket that's flat to crank down the washers. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my tools and get this all drilled out to install the bulkhead. The hole is super snug to the fitting, so it's not super loose when I install it, right? You can see I'm twisting it in just to keep it nice and tight. Nice and tight. I had to cut off a lot of those webbing right there just to fit the bulkhead nut, and we have the bulkhead secured. So we have the fuel basket reinstalled, the electrical, the original feed line, and now the new bulkhead. So we're gonna build a line now from here to the front, which is gonna go to the regulator. Coming to the workbench over here, I have everything laid out to make sure I have everything for the job. And first we need to mount the regulator, and then we need to build the line that's gonna go from the basket to the regulator, and then we can proceed with the rest of the stuff. So let's grab this and find a spot for it. I'm gonna grab this other fitting for the fuel pressure regulator. This is for the return from the fuel rail to the regulator before it goes back to the tank. May as well just throw it on now too, just so we can get that out of the way. This is a -6 AN to -10 orb. Has an O-ring, and that goes right there. I did move the plug here to the other side because we're not using that, obviously. I also have the 90 already down here to kind of let me know how far I can go with the regulator. And now we can build a line from the return to the regulator. PTFE hose and fitting is a little different than your regular AN hose and fitting. I've shown this many times on the channel before, but I'm just gonna explain it again anyways. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take the sleeve and I'm gonna install it on the hose itself first, right? Take a flathead and spread the nylon and the stainless away from the Teflon, because we have to install the little collar, which is this guy. So you got to make sure the Teflon is all the way to the end of the collar. You can't see it, but the Teflon is literally all the way to the end of the collar. Once that is flush, you take the other end of the AN fitting and you install it into the Teflon. It should just slide in like so. And then you take the sleeve and thread it on to the opposite end and tighten it down. That is how you install your PTFE hose. It's gonna be hard to show you guys this part, but I'm gonna connect this AN line right here to the bulkhead and feed the line underneath the car, and then I gotta crawl underneath to route it all the way to the front to know the length, and then we'll cut and install the fitting on the opposite end. I routed the PTFE line literally alongside the stock fuel line system that's underneath the chassis. It comes up on the subframe and it is currently right here, except we have a problem. This is literally all of 8 feet, and routing it in place would literally be the whole entire 8 line being used for just the return. So that means I don't have any line to build from the fuel line to the filter, filter to rail, and rail back to regulator. So this is all that I have left of the 8 feet PTFE-6, and obviously that is way too short for anything. I did go through my bin and I found these right here from my previous builds, and this one right here may work for the feed line, but it is in stainless. This one right here may work for the rail to the regulator. This one's too short for anything. So I think I'm gonna build the one from the fuel rail to the regulator, and then we'll figure out if he wants to just run this for now, and then we'll order some black ones to have on the way, and then we'll change it out later. That fitting right there is a -6 AN to -6 orb with a O-ring, and this side is going to be for the return line to the fuel pressure regulator. I'm trying to keep the lines tucked towards the battery, so it's not like, you know, all over the charge pipe and where the intake system would be sitting, right? So this line is perfect because it is a lot longer than we need it to be, so I can cut it to length. Now this end over here on the regulator, I wish I had a 45-degree fitting because it'll be more practical to tuck it closer to the battery. We'll probably change it later. Right now I'm just gonna go ahead and thread it in there just to hold it in place, and then kind of tuck it close to the battery and looping back over here. So I have the return line connected over to the fuel pressure regulator. I wish I had a 45 so that way we can get rid of this turn. You really don't want to bend a PTFE line because it will kink the hose on the inside. So we might change that out later to a 45 when I order it. We got the feed line for the fuel right here coming in, and then it goes out to the regulator, then regulator return back to the basket. Now the reason why I want to change this hard line to AN is because I don't really trust this right here, although it has been working years and years again from factory. But on a boosted application, we want to ensure this thing don't go popping or breaking off where it'll squirt fuel everywhere next to all the hot parts, and then it's going to be a problem. And on top of that, the fuel line literally sits right over the turbo. So I want to get rid of this and put AN to secure it tightly into the rail. And another reason why I want to switch it over is because I want to run a second filter system. As far as I've read online, the Element only has one filter system, which is in the basket, and I don't know if there's another one from the tank to the firewall and then to the fuel rail. So doing the AN line will allow me to integrate a fuel filter into the line before the fuel rail to ensure we get clean fuel going in every single time. But in theory, the car should technically turn on with this on here right now. Do I want to try it? I don't know. Do I know it'll work? For sure. I know you guys are not gonna like this, but hear me out. Fuel filter is sitting on the strut bar, secured with a worm clamp, not going anywhere. So the thing is, it's right over the downpipe, and we have a lot of heat management down here. I made a plate to block the heat from hitting the fuel filter with reflective tape. Now in my wagon, my fuel filter is literally sitting on the firewall right next to the downpipe, which is also wrapped and has been turboed since 2017. I don't think we're gonna have a major issue right here as long as we don't have any leaks. As crazy as it sounds, AN fittings are really good for securing nice and tight and not having any leaks. But I think this is what we're gonna do for right now until I order everything else to relocate the filter and build new lines and stuff. We're just gonna use what we have, and this is what I'm gonna do for now. Maybe. This right here is the factory feed line for the fuel, and it is integrated into a 1/4 inch barb fitting. And I actually got the tube fitting to 1/4 inch, and it should just slip on to the barb to convert it over to -6. So let me go ahead and remove this. This pops off like so. Pull this little plastic off. Brian provided this fitting here, 1/4 inch to -6 conversion. This is a little bit different than the one I usually use. He did show me how this goes on, so hopefully I get it right. From my understanding, you need to have this lip on here. You would slip the tube into the fitting like so, and then you put this little back cap on and slide that forward a little bit to slide this on, and then you would thread it, and that should lock it in place. Now the hard line is converted over to a -6. It is O-ringed and everything. It is nice and tight. I can't even twist it. So what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna tuck it back up and around on top of the strut bar.
So now the fuel line's up and over, and I don't know if you guys can see it back here, but there is a -6 on the filter right here, and then this is a -6. So we're gonna use a coupler, 6 female to 6 female, to connect the two. I want to make sure this is nice and tight because it's right over the turbo exhaust housing. Feed line now feeding into a filter, and then we're going to go from the filter to the fuel rail. Center feed. Oh yeah. Got all of my stuff cleaned up, and we are about ready to fire this car over with the new fuel system. And crossing fingers, man. I'm crossing fingers we don't have any leaks. But first, if we do, I want to make sure we're not leaking on top of our turbo here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just stuff that. I'll remove it once everything looks good. So let's go ahead and prime. I also got to check the rear as well too, to make sure that the back bolt head is not leaking. We're just gonna check fuel first. Okay, we don't have any leaks back here. I'm gonna check to make sure that the return is working. Yes, sir. One more time, check the front. Holy cow, we are pissing right out of there. Holy crap, that wasn't even tight at all. But it looks like we aren't leaking anywhere here, so that's good. I'm gonna set you guys right here and prime that one more time. Might get squirted on. All right, well, I don't see any leaks. I don't see any leaks. I'm gonna tell my mom to turn the key, just to ensure, so I can see it. Mom, come here, I need your help. Just turn it. Don't put chat. Just turn. Just turn it. Off, on. Madam tiết. We have Madam tiết. 45 psi. We're gonna crank that up to about 55. Okay, thank you. Bye. Hopefully the vibration don't knock you guys off the front core support here. Let's turn it on. We got fuel returning. Yes, sir. That is pretty low at idle. That is like 35 psi. About 55. Not gonna lie to you guys, it feels really good to finish up early. We still have like 2 hours of daylight, but we are done here in the garage. So everything we wanted to do today got done. Shout out to Brian from B&R Fittings. We have the adapter to the factory fuel line into a filter, PTFE-6 to the rail, from the rail-6 to the regulator. Regulator has its vacuum line, and we have the return system down low. We have not put any of the paneling back on yet because I want to put a relay system for the Walbro 450, but I don't have a relay system, so I'm gonna have to buy one, and then we'll get back to doing this later, and then we can put all this back together. I'm stoked that everything worked out and all the leaks are situated. This thing is ready to rock and roll. There's only a few more things we need to do. He wants me to build an exhaust system, which we're gonna have to find material because he did provide an exhaust system, but this is 2.5. For as much air as K takes in, on top of that turbocharge, you wanna make sure you have an exhaust system that'll help relieve it. So we're gonna change the exhaust system from the 2.5 to 3. We're still waiting for the coupler to show up in the next day or so we can connect the intercooler piping to the throttle body so we can induce some boost. We're gonna have to pull out the stock injectors to install the 1050s as well as the AFR wideband, and then on top of that the K tuner, and have a map to run the entire setup with the 4-bar map sensor and all the dead times and just all that good jazz. That's all gonna be its own video. But aside from all of those things, this thing is almost ready to rock and roll. I hope you guys been enjoying the progress update on the turbo element build. I know SI is happy because I've been sending him pictures, and he and I both cannot wait until this thing hits the dyno and see what it does. Everything we've installed into this engine bay is good for some numbers, but I'm really curious to see what the K24A4 will do. Again, I'm gonna wrap up the video right here. So if you guys enjoyed today's progress with the fuel system upgrade, be sure to leave a thumbs up. And if you guys want to stick around for the rest of the work to this vehicle, be sure to hit the subscribe button. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.